All right. Welcome to Teaching with Zoom. My name is Levi Sterling. I'll be your host for today. Jennifer Jordan will be co-hosting. You'll be able to find Jennifer in the chat. Hopefully any of the stuff that I forget to cover or say wrong, Jennifer can also jump in there and help us get corrected. But if you have any questions, we will take some pauses along the way at various times. But if you have something that immediately pops up that you think, boy, I sure would like to try to get an answer for that as quickly as possible, then go ahead and throw it in the chat. Jennifer will either do her best to answer it for you or make sure that we come back around and answer it for everybody. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. The good news is, of all the training sessions that you could possibly join, this one is in a lot of ways one of the simplest because we're really going to focus on one piece of technology, which is great. We don't have to worry about trying to figure out a whole bunch of different moving parts. We can really focus deep on Zoom and getting Zoom to use properly for teaching online. Zoom is a great tool. It is, in my opinion, between Zoom and Canvas, that's just about all you could ever need to run not just an okay online class, but a great online class. So we're going to really get into Zoom today and talk about everything that it can do, everything that it offers. So just first, most basic essentials. One of the things that I think is super important when running any sort of online class, and I'm going to try to practice what I preach in doing this, is setting expectations. Now, you know this in your classroom. You've surely done it with your students, but don't forget that whatever expectations you set with your students, you're going to have to go through and reset expectations whenever you are meeting in an online setting, both because they will have forgotten, they will assume they no longer apply, or simply because there are new expectations for meeting online. So one of the things that I wanted to let you know, we are going to start with everybody muted. There will be times for unmuting folks, but along the way, if you have questions, we will definitely try to get to those. Video is totally optional. If you would like to show your video stream, you certainly can. There's also certainly not a requirement. I would mention on that when it comes to your students, some folks feel like it's very important to them to have all of their students have their video up so they can know that their students are paying attention and know that their students are being active learners, etc. I would actually question that in many instances. Video should be however many people you would have at the front of the room, and that's how many people you should have on video. Now, if you are going to be moving to an open discussion format, the front of the room no longer applies so much. Therefore, maybe you do open up and ask people to get on videos for those discussions. But particularly in those times whenever there's one person presenting or two or three people presenting, leading a discussion, those are really the folks that I would focus on having in video. Don't get too caught up in making sure all of your students are always on video. Yeah. Some basics you might have noticed whenever you were joining in, you were asked to register for this. Now, some folks get scared whenever they see the option for registration. Should I turn on registration for a Zoom conference I'm going to hold? Where do the students go to register? How does that look? The good news is I added it to this session, not so much because we need it for this session, but because now you know what that registration looks like. It is not a scary, oh no, students have to go and they have to pre-register on some website somewhere to get everything set up. All it is whenever you click the link, you basically get an extra step that makes sure that we are capturing your name. Biggest reason to do this in a classroom setting is for attendance purposes. If you're wanting to use Zoom and to be able to properly capture attendance, that's one of the easiest ways to do it, is to just have that registration step. It doesn't take more than an extra second. It's well worth your time to turn on that registration. We'll show you how to turn that on whenever we get into the settings, just talking about some of the things you may have seen already. Also, nobody was here before me. I was the first person in here. but this is one of the things I was going to mention. If there was someone who joined the conference before me, you would have seen that you were able to join the conference before I got on. But you didn't see that because you weren't here first. I'll come back to why I think that's important. I think I would even say essential to join the conference before the presenter is able to join. And finally, if you've kind of looked around a little bit or you happen to notice, depending on what settings you've played with in this so far, there is going to be a poll. There is a poll already. We'll talk about how to get to that to make sure you're able to take the poll and make sure that you're good to go. But that's the basics of where we're headed and what you may have already noticed so far. If there are things you've already not noticed that I've mentioned, that's totally okay. We'll cover them. First things first, smu.edu/Zoom. There's also this way more complicated URL that you can go to, but for most services, if you do smu.edu / and then the name of the service, it will usually get you where you're looking to go. So from right here, you click the login button and it will launch the Zoom in browser panel. So we're going to have, the first thing you're going to see is going to be meetings. If you've never scheduled Zoom meetings, you won't have anything that shows up here. You'll actually see right here, this meeting that I've got right here. I'm going to refresh. There we go. You can see this meeting I have up at the top that says Teaching with Zoom. It's got a little green dot next to it. That's because that's the meeting we're in right now. The other ones do not have the little green dot because they're not going on right now. Those are future meetings. I can see upcoming meetings, which includes current, previous meetings. I can look at my personal meeting room, create meeting templates. That's your first thing you're going to see. Now, the first thing that I think you should always look at whenever you get into Zoom, before you start worrying about scheduling meetings and all that kind of stuff, is your profile. Go to your profile, make sure your name is in there. I highly recommend putting in a picture of yourself. You can put in department, company, all that kind of good stuff. The biggest things though, make sure your name is in there, which everyone I see in here has their name. But this is another good thing to let your students know that they're going to want to do, because by default, depending on how your account was set up, it is often your ID number instead of your account, instead of your name. So if you want to be able to make sure that the students are always, not just in your class, but wherever they go, they are representing themselves using their name, make sure those profiles are set up. Also, I wouldn't worry too much about instructing your students to do this, but if you would like to create a better personal link for yourself under profile, you can go in and you can customize this personal link. What that is going to do is going to allow you to make it just a little more human readable. By default, it's a really goofy string of numbers. With this, it's something that's a little easier for a human to read and remember and type properly. Just going to hit one more thing under profile. If you see capacity meeting 300, what that means is that you can have up to 300 users in a meeting at one time. I just mentioned that because I know there's been some faculty that was concerned saying, oh no, I've got sections where I'm lecturing 115 students. There's no way we're going to all be able to get in on the same Zoom conference. Yes, you can actually do up to 300. Now, there are limits to how many video streams can be active at the same time. You cannot have 300 active video streams. When people get concerned about that, I like to remind them that if you had 300 active video screens, where would you possibly be watching those 300 video screens? There's not really a display big enough to display that anyways, so it's okay if you don't have 300 active video screens. Like I said before, you'll actually probably want far fewer people on video regularly than you might think. Jumping back to the next item in the menu is meetings. Like I said, this is upcoming meetings. From here, you can schedule a new meeting. You can actually schedule a meeting from anywhere. There's a button that's always at the top. It lives up at the top, and it lives under meetings, just so that it's there twice. We're going to talk about scheduling a meeting. I'm not going to go through all of the options in here, because actually a lot of these options are things that we're going to want to set in the settings, and we're going to want to set them one time and not worry about them again. When you schedule a meeting, I'm a big fan of creating the topic for your meeting, Art 2, discussion, and then I'm going to add in that takes place Thursday at 9:30 a.m. And I'll show you in just a second why I'm putting the date in there. Description, enter your meeting description, date, time, how long it's going to last, time zone, always set to central. If you have a class that meets regularly, if you have a Thursday at 9 a.m. class, you can go ahead and set it to be not just this Thursday at 9 a.m. You can actually tell it to recur, not every day, just weekly. Repeat every 1 week, occurs on Thursday, set an end date, or after a certain number of occurrences. That way I don't have to remember to set up an Art 2 discussion every Thursday. It just exists and it will recur. Registration, that's one of the ones that I recommend just having on by default, so I wouldn't worry about setting all those in here. Password, again, any of this stuff, I would really try to get this stuff set once and then not have to worry about it later. There are a few options in here that if you need to edit for a specific meeting, it's better to have a general setting that is set once, that you don't have to worry about setting these things every time. So they're scheduling a meeting. I'm going to jump back to my meetings really quickly to talk about why I really like to put the day that the meeting is going to be scheduled in the meeting name or topic. You see right here, my teaching with Zoom, Monday, March 23, 12:30 to 2 o'clock. You'll notice over here on the right, whenever Zoom lists start times, it calls that meeting today at 12:30. This Tuesday, March 24th, it calls tomorrow at 12:30. I am sometimes want to know today, sometimes want to know tomorrow, but I also sometimes want to know what the actual day of the week is, Monday or Tuesday. I don't really know why they use the words today and tomorrow. I'm not a big fan of those words because it's easy for me to lose track of where I am in the week already. So if I just have Monday and Tuesday and today and tomorrow, it gives me fewer places where I'm going to get lost. Again, that's just a personal preference thing, but I think it helps with managing so that you don't get lost as to what day things are. That way, if you have someone who asks you about the meeting tomorrow, you can easily see the word tomorrow. If you have someone that asks you about the meeting Tuesday, you can also easily see the word Tuesday. So again, personal preference thing, but it helps me not get lost. I'm going to skip over webinars because webinars does not apply to what we are talking about. Webinars are for large groups. Now, you can, in theory, run a webinar for a small group, but as you'll notice right here, up to 100 video participants and 10,000 attendees. Webinars are really for like major things. These are in place of like a conference, like an in-person, like I'm going to a conference. This is not for running a class. So webinars are disabled on most accounts at SMU, including yours. So we're just going to skip over webinars. We're going to come back to recordings. Under settings. Now, this is the big thing where you're going to want to spend a little bit of time in settings. This is, to me, other than the use side of it, because there's really two big things to focus on. There's use and there's settings. Settings is like the second biggest, most important thing that we can learn out of this session. By default, everything has an off or an on. That's all these are. They're off and on switches. There are a number of them that have a default that I think is great. You should just leave it as it is. There are some that have a default that I think you should switch. And I'll talk about those that I think are either set the way they are and need to definitely stay that way, or the ones that should be changed and you should definitely change. The other ones, there's a few that I can skip over and we don't really have to worry about, but those that really either should not be changed or should be changed, I'd like to mention. The first two are host video and participant videos. For the sake of yourself and the sake of your students' privacy, leave host and participant videos off by default. You will never have a time that you go, wow, I'm super glad my video started before I was ready. That's never going to happen. Also, you're never going to have a time where the students are glad that the video started without them being ready for the video to start. Turning the video on should be something that people choose to do. I know some folks like to say, well, if I don't turn it on, then they'll never turn their video on. I told them at the beginning of the semester that the videos are going to be turned on and they should just expect it. That's still not enough. Respect your students' privacy. Let them decide to turn the video on. You would want the same for yourself. Go ahead and turn the video on for yourself when you are ready. Have it off by default. Audio type. Computer audio is almost always better than telephone audio. Now, that's not always true, because if somebody has a really terrible internet connection, then maybe telephone would be better. At the end of the day, there's really never an advantage to only allowing one. So don't turn it to just telephone, otherwise you're going to be limiting yourself from the quality of computer audio that you could have. Also, don't set it to only computer, because what if a student has really bad internet and all they can do is call into the meeting? Just leave it on for both. This one right here, I mentioned earlier that you were able to join before me, even though no one did. This is so important because there's this old idea, especially from like 1980s comedy movies about colleges, right, that spread around about, if the professor shows up 10 minutes late, we get to leave for the day. However true that is in the mind of students, that is some just fact of college, that is really even more true in almost everyone's mind when it comes to an online meeting. If today's meeting starts at 12:30, started at 12:30. If at 12:28 you had tried to join the meeting and were unable to join, there's a chance that you would have thought, oh, the meeting must not start till 12:30. I'll try again in 2 minutes. There's also a chance that you would have said, really? 2 minutes and it hasn't started yet? It must have gotten canceled. However true that is 2 minutes before the meeting, if for some reason I had been running 5 minutes late and at 12:32 you had tried to get into the meeting and you were not able to get into the meeting, the likelihood of you saying, well, I couldn't get into the room, I'll try again, is very low. Students don't mind getting into the room digitally and waiting for you there digitally. If something happens, they're usually pretty understanding of that. But if they can't even get into the meeting because you're not there, they are going to assume meeting didn't happen. And trust me, they will timestamp, they will send you an email. Look, 12:32, I tried to log in, you weren't there, the room wasn't even available. What do you want me to do? So let them join the room. There's nothing they can mess up. There's nothing they can break. They will just digitally be sitting around waiting for you. Like I said, a number of these are kind of defaults that I'm going to skip over, like these right here. I would like to point out, require a password when scheduling new meetings, or password for instant meetings, or password, any of these password related ones. These are all set to default. I would just say, on the subject of passwords, be cautious with passwords. It's tempting for faculty to sometimes think, okay, I need to protect my lessons that I'm giving. I'm going to require passwords for my students to get in. I highly recommend passwords for students to get into lectures, because that is yet another barrier. Read excuse. That is yet another barrier for students to not getting into your sessions. If you put up a password when a password is not essential, that is just another thing that's just another thing that students can say, oh, I had trouble with a password. Oh, I couldn't find the password. Oh, I couldn't tell if that was an L or a 1. Just unless you absolutely need passwords. Now, if you are doing a one-on-one session with a student, or a meeting with a TA, or a TA and a small group of students in a larger class, if it's a more personal interaction, passwords can be a great option. I would never have a password to protect a lecture. You're just going to run into issues with people saying that they can't get in. One that I have modified is mute participants upon entry. So to me, this goes hand in hand with the camera, if I'm going to turn the cameras off by default, I also want to have the microphone turned off by default. Just have folks muted when they come in. Communicate that with them, especially the first day. Maybe remind them that, for the first week or two, that, hey, we're going to start off muted. I'll let you know when it's time to unmute. But yeah, go ahead and start off muted. It has just as much to do with controlling the discussion as it does preventing audio issues. In a group this size where we only have a few people in the room digitally, if someone is having audio feedback issues where I get that terrible whistling, whirring, buzzing sound, I can probably figure out who it is pretty easily and mute them. If you're in a lecture hall, a digital lecture hall of 60 students, and one student is having audio feedback issues, it's going to be hard to pinpoint who that is that's causing these terrible echoes and whistles and burrs. So just start with everybody muted. When folks mute and they need to talk, you can usually tell pretty easily who it is that's causing those problems. Upcoming meeting reminders, that's just a personal thing. There's a Zoom desktop client. There are ways to go around having the Zoom desktop client installed. I don't recommend them. Just download it and install it. And especially for no other reason than it gives you meeting reminders, which I totally need. Auto-saving chats, turn your chats onto auto-save. Just there's no reason to not have that turned on by default. You'll never say, oh, I wish I hadn't saved that chat. Now remember, this is the chat, which is this chat box over here. It's not the discussion. It's not the video, not this type of video chat. It is the text chat that is being auto-saved. I like to allow file transfers. That's totally up to you. If you don't want that to happen, then you can leave that off. I like to do it, but I only like to allow PDFs to be shared. Number one, it keeps me from accidentally sharing the wrong file, but also keeps people from sending me things that I'm just not wanting to receive. I have a co-host turned on by default. That does not mean anyone is always my co-host. It just means it always prompts me for a co-host because I almost always want one. My advice to you, if at all possible, if you have a TA or you are co-teaching, make that other person a co-host. You will never regret having a co-host. Best case scenario, you have a co-host for your calls with your students, your class sessions with your students, and they never have to do anything. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, when they are there with you, it's another person to troubleshoot. It's another person to take down the student who decides that they are going to be the most important person in the room and that they need to dominate the conversation. That's harder to handle whenever you're online. Let them handle it. Let them get in a private message with that person. Let them maybe even focus on, if necessary, bumping that person from the class so that you can continue and not have to be distracted. I highly recommend, if you have the ability to have a co-host, get one. If you don't have a TA or you're not co-teaching, find another professor that you can buddy up with on at least your first session or two. You be their co-host, let them be your co-host. Polls, I have polls turned on. I'm going to ask you folks to take a poll in just a moment. Show Zoom windows during screen share. Now, I don't usually recommend that one, actually. That's like if I move this little Zoom window into here, you should be able to see it. Or if I move this one in here, you can see it. I don't recommend that most of the time. I actually like that Zoom hides those. I have them turned on because I'm teaching Zoom itself. So it's helpful whenever I'm teaching it. Other than that, nonverbal feedback, I highly recommend turning on nonverbal feedback. That allows, whenever we're in here, you can react with a yes, no, go slower, go faster, or a few other options. While we're here, while we're at the nonverbal feedback, if you can, see if you can pull this up and leave me some sort of nonverbal feedback just as a test. If you can give me a yes, a no, a coffee cup, saying you need a break, whatever you can do, see if you can locate this. If you're having trouble finding this window, okay, so I just got a thumbs up from Douglas over here. Feedback is super useful, not just in a not just in a polls or a message in the chat or something. It's really good to ask for and receive feedback from your students every so often, just so you know that your meeting is still working. I would definitely tell you to be cautious with the idea of a pop quiz online. Some folks are really big on the idea of, I always want to make sure my students are always participating all the time, 100%. Trying to do a pop quiz online where you do like okay, everybody, you have 30 seconds to give me a thumbs up. Otherwise, I know you're not here. People have kids, people have dogs, people have the need to run to the restroom. I don't recommend that. What I do recommend is using it regularly to say, hey, can I get a couple thumbs up from people? Can I get a couple yeses in the chat just so you know that you can still hear me? Especially if you switch between one application and another that you are sharing. Or if you accidentally unplug your headset and you plug it back in. Do yourself a favor, do a quick, hey folks, just making sure you can still hear me. It's well worth your time so that you're not 10 minutes in and then somebody finally messages you and says, hey, we haven't heard you for the last 10 minutes. Just save yourself that time. Get some of that nonverbal feedback. Or another thing that I'm a big fan of, if you have folks on video, if you can say, hey, can anybody give me a thumbs up in video if you can hear me? And as soon as you get that thumbs up in video, you know you're good to go. We'll go into some of these more advanced stuff like breakout rooms where we actually get into Zoom, talk about virtual background, and that's really it for settings. That's the majority of what I highly recommend. Honestly, the biggest things to keep in mind, if you forget everything else and you change nothing else, start with your videos off. Just please, please, please start with videos off. Account profile, this is not something you have to worry about at all. This is actually just SMU's account. This is not your account, so you don't have to worry about that. And finally, reports. Reports are a really nice place to be able to see who is actually participating in your meeting. You can put in a time range. You can see, so these are meetings that I have had in the past. How long was the meeting? When was it started? When was it ended? All kinds of super valuable information is in here. You can export it as a CSV. We'll talk a little bit more about reporting in a minute. Okay, before we've kind of looked at the Zoom settings, we've looked at this side in here in the browser side of accessing Zoom. We're in just a moment going to get into the Zoom desktop client and actual Zoom application windows. Before we jump into those, what questions do we have? Feel free to throw them in the chat box, or feel free to unmute yourself on the microphone if you prefer to ask that way.
I just wanted to see if the microphone, if you're picking me up, are you picking me up?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, thanks.
Levi, I was wondering if you could point out where you would set the time zone, since some professors were having an issue with that already today.
Certainly. Under your profile, so that's on the far left, if you scroll down, so this is going to be your account. There's actually a couple places to look at this, but the first place we want to check is under your profile. So that's for your account defaults. That's where you're going to go under time zone. So right here under date and time, you're going to want to make sure you have the proper time zone right here. The other thing that you're going to want to check, whenever you set up a meeting, when I go to schedule a meeting, right here under date and time and length, right here, this time zone by default should pull from your profile time zone. But in case you see that it is different, in case you see that you're on Hawaii time or something like that, go ahead and update it to your correct time zone, which for us should be Central Time. You can have, I believe there is a, I don't remember if there's a default in here. No, there's not a default in these settings because it should be pulling from your profile by default, but set it in your profile. You should be good to go, but it doesn't hurt to double check whenever you're scheduling a meeting. Just take a look right here at the time zone under your date and time to ensure that you are in the correct time zone, because we are in Central Time. If you're someone who has not been affected by this, great. That's terrific. If you are someone who has been affected by this, you know how much of a disaster it can be, especially if you have SMU exists in Central Time Zone, a professor who for a certain time is in another, and a student who for in yet another time is in a different time zone. It can be quite a mess. So just get everything on Central and then let folks know that you are operating your class on Central Time Zone. Okay, before we get into too much in the technical side, let's take another quick aside to talk about just some best practices. These are going to be best practices for you as a faculty, for you as a presenter. Number one is fail faster. It's a mantra that is used in game design. I'm the ATSD for Guildhall, the Master's Game Design program. It's something that they talk about regularly. It's okay to fail. Just get your failure out of the way sooner better than later. If you can fail not in front of students, that's awesome. If you're going to fail in front of students, fail in front of them the very first time. What I mean by that is get your hiccups out of the way early. Schedule a meeting, a Zoom meeting with no students in it. Just have your TA join. Have them come in, have them try it out. That way when anything breaks, you will have done it without students there. Now, is there going to be a time that you have a bad Zoom session in front of students? Yes, you better believe it. Just like in class, there are days that even if you have everything perfectly planned out and you're not even using any technology that can break, there are still days that you walk away from class going, I don't even know what happened in class today. That was a disaster. It's going to happen. Get your first failures online out of the way early so that you know how to deal with them. You know how to move through. Also, let your students fail faster. Do it in a low pressure situation. Don't let your first online failure be on an exam day. Get your students in a Zoom session that is low pressure. Get them in a time where your biggest goals are making sure they can log in, making sure they know how it works, making sure they understand the chat, making sure they know just what to do. Just try to get in a situation where they're not super stressed the very first time. Like I said earlier, join your online class early, get in that session. You don't have to be in there 30 minutes before it starts. There's no reason for that. But if you can, try to be in there 5 minutes early. That's always the goal I have set for myself. Be in my sessions 5 minutes before it starts. Don't be afraid of silence. Sometimes you can often read the room when you're in a room full of people looking at their faces. You ask a question, you hear a silence, but you see thinking. You can see them thinking, you can see them processing, you can see what they're working through. You can't see that whenever you're online. Even if you have video enabled for the students, you can't see the thought process, you can't see the wheel spinning. Don't be afraid of the silence. It is okay to have a moment of silence. Breakout rooms, which we're going to go into detail on how to get to a breakout room. But breakout rooms exist. They're great for making smaller chats. It's if you were to say to your class, all right, let's get into 4 table groups. It's the same thing, just digitally. Like I said before, start with everybody muted, start with camera off. And final, just best practice for you, don't play video over video streams. What that means is, if I have a video that I want to share with my class, I should send them a link to watch the video. I should not stream the video over the video stream. If I have a really, really good, strong connection, and you have a really, really good, strong connection, and we both have high-end computers, and we both have just not even Wi-Fi, direct Ethernet plug-in access, and everything is an ideal setting, streaming a video over a video stream. What I mean is, if I were to play a YouTube video or something from my browser and stream it through Zoom, even with ideal settings, that video experience would be mediocre at best. It's terrible at worst, mediocre at best. So don't stream video over video. It's no good. No one will be happy that you did. So those are just some best practices for you to keep in mind. I see chat, it says, the one question I had, you answered already. What is a co-host? What if a co-host is a non-SMU individual? So yes, you can make a co-host out of a non-SMU person. You can actually invite for it. One of the best things about Zoom is it works outside of SMU. If you were to have seen any of the other options that are available, like conferences in Canvas and some of those other things, they are actually only available inside of SMU. The great thing about Zoom is Zoom does play very nicely with outsiders. So you can invite either as a co-host or as just a participant, anyone from outside. I would go as far as saying, if you want people who are non-SMU to be a part of an online video session, you should use Zoom. That is the preferred method if you want to be adding in non-SMU folks. Okay, let's jump into, and for this, I'm actually going to I don't need this PowerPoint slide right now, but I'm going to be pulling some dark stuff in front of it. So just for the sake of contrast, I'm going to lead this little section up right here. First thing is going to be this control bar right here. Can anybody give me a thumbs up or a yes if they can see this control bar? You should be able to, if my Zoom settings are correct. Okay, you can see the bar. That's great. Okay, so you can see right in here, I can mute. That mutes me. I can stop my video. I can go under Manage Participants, poll, choose what I'm sharing. I can pause the share, which right here, I'm going to go ahead and hit pause share. So you can still hear me. The meeting is still taking place. My video is still moving. But what has paused here is the video stream of my desktop. That is what has been paused. So I will show you that it has been paused by, I'm going to move that little icon, that little bar that I'm using, and I'm going to hit resume share, and you should see that the bar has jumped up to a new spot. So what that does is it just pauses the stream of what screen you are sharing. You can also annotate. Now, these annotations, folks sometimes get mixed up. Usually faculty has a better time with this than students. Usually if students are annotating, they will sometimes get confused and feel as though, especially on a situation like this, it's easy to think I'm drawing inside this PowerPoint window. Remember, you are not doing this inside this PowerPoint window. I'm not even doing it inside of my browser. It's all the way on my screen. The entire screen can be drawn on because I am drawing not on what I'm seeing, I'm drawing on the feed that is being sent out to you. So under annotation, you can put text, drawings, you can stamp shapes, which is a really great way to be able to point out specific things that you need for people to be able to find. This is one of those things that I would definitely, anything under annotations, I would definitely play around with before you get in front of your students, because otherwise it's very easy to find yourself kind of not doing things the way you meant. Big fan of annotations, super great way to be able to show things to your students that you specifically are wanting them to locate. You can even save those annotations. It puts them in a folder for you. So that's this bar up until remote control. Under remote control, you can actually give access to your computer to someone else. Now, I would go ahead and say here, It's hard in a lot of situations for me to think of a time when you would actually want to hand over control of your computer to someone else, even if it was a TA, even if it was someone you were co-teaching with. The reasons that you would want to have them actually doing what's on your screen are pretty limited, but just know that it is a feature that exists there. Under More, you will find how to get to chat, those breakout rooms that I talked about, which I'm going to click on right here. I'm going to assign 3 participants into 2 rooms. It's just going to do it automatically, and I can hit create. If I go 3, you can see it. If I have 1 room, all 3 go in 1, 2, 1 to 2 per room, 3, 1 participant per room. I'm not going to create those rooms right now because I don't want to mess up the feed that we currently have and get folks confused as to where we are in this current session. Just know that that's where you create breakout rooms, and what it does is basically creates little subsets of this meeting where folks are now in mini versions of this conference. I can pause and stop recording. I highly recommend, if you're making an important recording that you're going to be sharing out later, if something comes up, such as a technical difficulty, go ahead and pause the recording, get yourself through the technical difficulty, and then unpause. You'll be happy you did that later. Share computer sound. Now, I would be very cautious with sharing computer sound. Reason I say that is there might be a time that there's a sound on your computer that you need your students to hear. There might be a time that you really need your students to watch a 10-second video clip and you just don't care how bad it sounds or how bad it looks. You just have to show that to them. In that instance, you would have to turn on share computer sound. The biggest issue, though, with having that on by default is every little ding, every little notification that your computer makes is going to be played through to every participant. So I do not recommend having your computer sound being shared by default. People don't want to hear every time you get an email in the background. Just leave that off. They don't want to hear it. Okay, so that's this bar. I mentioned earlier, right in here, you can see who the participants are in the meeting. You can, from here, mute those participants. You can, for myself, I can rename, or I can even edit my profile picture from here. There's actually more options whenever I look at someone else in the meeting. Those options, whoops. Those options include, I can enter a direct chat with someone. I can stop their video if I do not want their video to be shown anymore. I can spotlight their video, which puts their video up to the front, makes them the main attraction. I could make someone else the host. I can't make Jennifer co-host because she is a co-host, but I could withdraw her co-host permissions. I could assign to type closed captions or rename her. You can see right here, Douglas. Douglas, I could make a co-host. Him, I can't remove co-host permissions because he doesn't currently have them, but you can toggle all of those in here. So that's your participants window. Also worth noting, if you are going to have a time where people can say yes or no, they can remove those on their own. If you click on the same thing you just added in, or if you click on an alternate, it will switch it out. But let's say you take a time where you say, okay, is everybody keeping up? And you get a whole bunch of people that give you the response of go slower. Once you see those come in, you can hit clear all. That way, next time you ask for a question and say, is this a better speed? You can get a bunch of yeses and know that you have a new response and that you're getting new information. Okay. That's from in here. That's from inside of Zoom, both looking at this meeting controls bar and the participants window. When it comes to chat, I'm going to pull this chat window in. You can see that I can do a direct chat with someone. You'll notice this chat window is a little weird for some folks to get used to, because right here I've got something that I said, Douglas, Jennifer, Douglas, Jennifer. I'm switching to just talking to Jennifer. When I talk to just Jennifer, Jennifer's the only person who got this message that says, hi, Jennifer. Folks sometimes get a little startled because they go, I thought I was just sending that to Jennifer. I see it in the group chat. You'll notice right here where it says privately. Right here, that's the thing that lets you know that message just took place between you and someone else. I say to be cautious of this and to look out for this, not so much for the messages you send, but especially the messages you receive. If I were to receive a message from, let's say, Jennifer, and she were to send a message to me that says, whatever it might be, and it comes through privately, I should, to the best of my ability, respond to that message privately because she sent it to me privately. She came to me expecting privacy. I should respond with privacy. So in a situation like that, I just got a message from Jennifer. She said hello. What I don't want to do is go, in the midst of my video, I get this message from Jennifer. I don't want to go, oh, hello. Because if you didn't see that message, which you didn't, you would not know the context for me just in the midst of everything shouting out, oh, hello. So just watch for that. If you get messages that come through privately, don't respond to them in front of everyone. Now, if Jennifer were to message me and say, hey, your video cut out, you could, to the class, say, I just got a message saying it looks like my video is cutting out. That's fine. Just understand that there are certain things that you want to, be sensitive of. If a student messages you and says, I'll be right back, I'm running to the restroom, if you say out loud in your video, that's fine, go ahead. Everyone else in the class is going to have no idea why you just said that, and they're going to be confused. So just keep those private chats private. Right here, under File, I can go to Dropbox, Google Drive, Box, or my computer. I can upload a file, and I'm actually going to do that in just a little bit, but that's what this is that we're seeing right down here. And finally, this video panel. There's kind of a lot on your screen whenever Zoom is really up and running at full force. This video panel right here, you can hide this thumbnail. You can show just who is currently active. Now, it doesn't show me on mine, it shows Jennifer because it assumes that I want to see who the other most interesting video people are. Or if I go to this one right here, I can see everybody. I can see even the folks who don't have video. From here, I can stop someone else's video. A lot of the same options that we've seen in the other panels. You can chat with someone, rename them, spotlight, change their host permissions. That can all be done from here as well. I can say, I need Jennifer, I think she's talking and we can't hear her. One, I could say, Jennifer, I think you're still muted, or I could hit unmute on her mic to make sure that she's coming through. You'll see on the left-hand side the little red microphone with a line through it. That tells you who is muted so that you can ensure that folks are able to talk. Okay, that's the stuff that you're going to see whenever you're in the midst of a Zoom meeting. The big thing, and I'm going to move all this stuff out of the way, the biggest part of the Zoom desktop client is this right here. This is, if you were to launch up Zoom on your computer, this is what you would see. It's a lot of the same stuff that you can do from the website. It's just not as feature rich. I can start a meeting. This would normally say start a meeting, but because I'm in a meeting, I don't have that option. I can join a meeting, schedule a meeting. I can go to my chat. There's actually ways to do chat outside of Zoom. Now, good question. Can folks see the Zoom window?
Yeah, sorry. I just want to double check because I'm still just
Yes.
in the PowerPoint, but this is not for me. This is for
Yes. No, that is a good question. I have it set to where Zoom should show. No.
okay.
All right. So let's do this. Zoom desktop. I'll pull up an image of it. So here's what you would be seeing. New meeting, join, schedule, share screen. There's also an option in here for chat, as you can see right here. I am not a big fan of using Zoom as a chat client to just chat with folks. I have so many other ways that I can have a chat with people. I have currently that I am using, I have WhatsApp, Telegram, Skype, Discord, Teams, Slack. I have too many things. I don't need another chat platform made available to me. If you're looking for one and you want to have your video chats and your text chats all in one place, sure, go for it. But I don't really know why there would be a reason to move to it other than you simply haven't found one and you want to try it. You can look at your meetings and your contacts. Everyone at SMU is searchable here in contacts, so you can actually find whoever it is you're looking for. What else? There's what the chat looks like. Again, unless you're desperate for a new chat client, I would probably not bother with it. We don't have phone calls turned on our Zoom, so that's not going to show up on yours. We don't use Zoom phone. We use soon to be Skype phone. Right here, under the meetings tab, this will show your upcoming meetings. You can start your meeting from here, copy the invitation. You can even edit some of the meeting details. The edit settings is more powerful in the browser window of your settings, but you can usually edit the basics that you need to change in here. And then finally, it should show us contacts, which you can search for who you're looking for in your contacts. So that is, now let's see if you can see this window. Can you all see this window that I just pulled up with general video audio settings? Yes, okay, good. I don't know why that other one wasn't showing. It's interesting. From in here, from the Zoom desktop, if you click the little gear in the top right corner, it will pop up this settings. All kinds of settings in here. I'm not going to go through everything. There's just so much that you could look at. I just will tell you some of the basics. Under video, you can select which webcam you're wanting to pull from. Mirror my video, that's one, if you are going to be writing on something and you need people to be able to read it, you will need to set it to where the video is mirrored. Otherwise, it will naturally make things look backward. So check your mirror my video if the things you have written down are looking weird. Audio, you can check all of your audio settings in here. You can change where you want your audio coming out, how you want your audio coming in. I really like this feature right here that is turned on by default. Press and hold space key to temporarily unmute yourself. This is for one of the things if you just want to have yourself typically on mute, but to be able to jump in there real quickly, space, you can unmute yourself just for a quick jump in. Information about sharing your screen, how chat will work. Virtual background. This is not actually where I am right now. This is a virtual background. This is some apartment that I found a picture of online. I could switch to being nowhere, or I could switch to, really all kinds of cool, nice things back behind me. But this is not actually where I am. This is just where I make it look like I am. Now, have fun with that. Try all kinds of cool stuff if you want. Here I am playing the role of Jim in the office. Just whatever you think works for you is great. I would just recommend this. Try to keep it, you know, at least to where it's maybe push it all the way to interesting, pull it back before it gets to distracting, if that makes sense. Students will, if and when students find out about it, they will push for distracting. So you might want to caution them on that as well. If you have a green screen, this does work even better on a green screen. This does not work on every computer. Some computers are not powerful enough or simply don't have the right settings to be able to do virtual backgrounds. If it can't, that's okay. Honestly, the most important two things to talk about in virtual backgrounds are, number one, it exists, so if you'd like to try it, go for it. But number two, if you are going to have any sort of writing, or if you're going to try to hold up any sort of paper, it's not going to work very well. Virtual backgrounds and a piece of paper don't play very well together. So while sometimes you can get it to work, a lot of other times it just comes through as clear. You can even see, once it picks up on you as a person, there's a certain plane that when things get back behind, well, and now my hand is showing up just fine. But there are certain things that will tend to start to disappear. See, my hand is disappearing back here. Just know that if you use virtual backgrounds, it can be great for if you're just having a video conference, but when it comes to text or things back behind you, it does make the things back behind you disappear, for good or for bad. Under recordings, we're going to come back to recordings in a second. No, let's do it right now. Let's jump back into the rest of these. You can figure out, you can edit your profile. You can look at your statistics of your use. You can give feedback. And here's the cool keyboard shortcuts. Let's talk about recordings. I'm going to jump back into Zoom in the browser. Recordings. We skipped over this earlier. Let's talk about recordings. These are the cloud recordings that I have made. These are the local recordings I have made. Now, I will go ahead and tell you, we have cloud storage space, but we don't have enough for your videos. So what do you mean we have it, but we don't have enough? Here's when you should use cloud recordings. If you are recording, let's say you find yourself in a tricky situation and you're going to have to run class from your iPhone. You've downloaded Zoom for your iPhone. It's where you're going to have to record your session. It's the best you've got for right now. Go ahead and set it to record in your cloud recording. That's totally fine. Just later, back it up in your Box account, in your Panopto, in your wherever it is you're storing your videos, record it to the cloud and back it up later. Your default should be local recordings. We will run out of space in our cloud recording space. Well, I'll just get all my stuff in there before other folks record their stuff. That way I won't have a problem. That's a nice thought, but what happens with this type of cloud storage is you put your stuff in there and it just gets pushed down the line. Whenever the new stuff comes in, eventually we push the old stuff out. So there is no get in before everyone else. There is no, well, I'm going to tell everyone I'm important, so I need to keep mine. The videos just can't stay forever in cloud recordings. Use cloud recordings really for emergencies. If you're on a mobile device and you need to be able to save a recording, or if you're on someone else's computer that you can't save to their hard drive, by all means, use the cloud recording and then back it up elsewhere. A really nice feature in the local recordings is, if you see right here, this is the topic of the recording, ID, start time, but here's where it's really cool. I have 3 different local recordings that were all done on 3 different computer names. These are 3 different computers. It actually keeps track from this web client. It keeps track of which computer I recorded it on and where it was stored on that computer. Now, if I ever delete that recording, I can go in here and tell it delete so that it doesn't keep track of that record anymore. But this is super useful because I'm on the computer, I'm on this computer right now. This is a laptop sitting on my desk, and this is my desktop. Now I don't have to go, man, I don't even remember what computer I was on when I recorded that, let alone to, especially not to remember which folder that went into. Right here, it will tell you which computer or device and which folder those video recordings got put into. So really cool feature. Just make sure your default is record locally. Cloud recordings are just for an emergency, and don't leave them in there. Well, it was an emergency, I had to do it, so I'm going to leave it. No, go ahead and grab it, download it, share it elsewhere. Otherwise, it's going to get lost. Okay, I had to jump back and cover recordings real quick. I'm glad we did that. Okay, let's look at our outline. We did inside Zoom. Okay. Do one more thing, and then we'll do some questions if necessary. For your students, so just some best practices. We talked earlier about best practices for you as an instructor, best practices for students. These are things to tell your students. Make sure you're muted when you're not talking. Be yourself and respect others. These are kind of things that to us should seem like they just make common sense, but they're things that students will forget, especially when it is be yourself. That's both in a don't worry, it's okay to be yourself, but also in a, hey, you need to be yourself whenever you are online. You are not to be someone else. We don't come online to be a different person. This is class. You are still representing yourself. We're not taking on new identities. Encourage the students to ask questions using chat. One of the best reasons to have chat is you can take questions and not have to stop and derail what you're doing. If I have the chat box available, as many things as take place in it can just happen without me. And then when I'm ready, I can say, okay, let's go to the chat and see how things are going. Whereas I can't always do that. Sometimes I'm in the middle of things, I can't look at the chat, but encourage students to put stuff in chat because it lets you come back to things. It also keeps students from constantly unmuting themselves and jumping into the midst of what you're saying. Your students sometimes will need reminders the first time they just jump in and start talking over you and they say, wait, I have a question. Take that moment. It's a learning opportunity. Go ahead and throw your question in the chat. We'll come back to it just as soon as we have a break and then continue on. Use reactions to engage with your class. I mentioned that earlier. The yes, no, thumbs up, all kinds of great stuff you can do. Encourage your students to think before they write. I know we're in college, we shouldn't have to remind our students of that, but do it. Encourage them to think before they put anything in the chat. And encourage your students to have an intentional space for a meeting, whether that is, this is the place and this is the setup and this is when I have class, or at least this is the computer, this is the headset, the students need to set up to the best of their ability a place to have class. Now, the good news is you're not going to, at least for a little while, you're not going to run into a lot of issues of students trying to participate in class from Starbucks because, well, nobody's going to Starbucks right now. So you're at least going to have some time of, you're actually going to be able to build some pretty good behaviors on that because your students will just be at home. But encourage them to have an intentional space for where they are going to be. The provost expects all faculty to have intentional times and spaces when they are meeting with their classes, meaning synchronous classes during class time. Encourage your students to follow that example of being ready in a place at the time that it is time for a class. What questions do you have for me? I have one more thing to share with you. I said I would share a file with you before we leave so that we could, number one, test the file sending and sharing, but also it's something that you'll want to have. What questions, concerns, comments do we have?
Well, I'll chime in. One thing that I've had some faculty ask for clarification on in our sessions last week was how to record offline. Um, so Val and Douglas, are you guys okay with that? Is that something that you would like us to go over really fast? You can chime in verbally or just with a thumbs up or down if you're good.
Well, this is Val. I don't really like the idea of recording. This is probably going to be the first time I've done this, so it's probably going to be a lot of fumbling, and I think I can get through it. But to say that I'm not even sure I've got training wheels on the bicycle at this point, but we'll give it a shot. And I just assume not have it recorded, but I guess if somebody does record it, okay. Did you hear that?
Yes. So, and here's the good news on this. However much you're feeling like you're not sure what's going on or what to do or how to do this right, the good news is in talking to students, they are feeling that exact same thing, just acutely. If you just let them know, like, hey, we're all in this together, this is all brand new for all of us, let's get through this together, they'll actually be glad to hear that you're feeling that way too, because frankly, most of the students are pretty terrified at this point, not knowing what's going on. So you're in good company. There's a lot of folks who are feeling that same way, like, well, I don't exactly know, but I'm gonna do my best. So you're in good company on that, including the students. They're feeling very much the same way.
That's about the way it is all the time anyway. So,
Oh yeah.
Oh, Levi, is the poll, did they get the poll?
Oh yeah, let's do the poll. I almost forgot that. Thank you. I did forget that. I have a poll I mentioned earlier. From this bar, I click on polls and this poll pops up. I'm going to use this poll as an example of how you can take attendance. And the questions are, I'm here, yes or no. Now, I realize how silly a question like I'm here, yes or no is, because no one clicks no, hopefully, but you have to have a question. So I'm going to say launch polling. And at this point, you should be getting a poll that you can respond to that says, yes, I'm here. This is a great way, like I said, to capture attendance, because this is actually going to go, because you had to register for this event, you are going to be able to go in and you're going to be able to see who is actually responding to that. Now, I mentioned earlier under reports, view registration reports and poll reports for meetings. You can actually go under user reports meetings and you can generate your reports for those meetings that will tell you what were the outcomes of your polls, what was the outcome of your registration. Now, why would you want to have polls versus registration? Why does it really matter one versus the other? Couldn't you just have your registration and not worry about polls? Sure, I like the output that the polls give you. I also like that there's that active element with the students. I like that you can see, are the students actively engaged currently? You could even do a little bit more on there. I just did the most simple, basic, yes, I'm here. You could make it more meaningful than that. But polls are a really good way to be able to take attendance in class. Jennifer, thank you for reminding me on that poll. Yeah, under reports, you can actually run a meeting report and it'll give you everything. I obviously can't run a report on the meeting that we're currently in right now. I don't think, let's try. Let's see if it'll actually give us any good information since the meeting is going on right now. While this is processing, I am going to go into the chat box. And I'm going to send a file. I just sent a file. It's Great Tools. It should say built. That's my mistake. Great Tools built into Zoom for engagement. It's just a little bit further information if you're looking to see more information about how to use Zoom. It's just a whole lot more if you're really wanting a further deep dive into stuff. Oh, I sent that just to Jennifer. There we go. Now I sent it to everybody. So you should be getting in the chat a file that you can take a look at. Like I said, it's just a deep dive, kind of every cool add-on that you can add in. Okay, my report is done generating. Like I said, I've never run this during a meeting, so I don't know how useful this is going to be. Yeah, it looks like I didn't get the poll results, but I did get last name, first name, and registration time, automatic approval. So from right here, I can pretty easily take attendance. Now, I would caution you on this whenever it comes to taking attendance. If you have 30 students in your class and you see that you have 30 students that showed up, I would still do a double check on that just to make sure that you're actually getting the right people and the right number of people. All right, there was a question in chat. Not asking for students to register, just sending them a link. Plan on using the reports function to see what students jumped on the call. It makes sense. So yes, you can just go into usage of a meeting. There is a way to pull, do like this one right here. If I click on the number of participants, this is in a meeting that I never had anyone register for. I can actually see in here, and I can export this. I can see who is joining this way as well. My biggest concern with doing that is, so I feel pretty good about knowing who this Catherine is. I don't have any questions as to who that is. Without doing full registration though, I have no idea who Mike is. That's the one concern with just letting folks join without a registration, because someone named Mike without an email address joined in. They were super participatory, but I don't know who Mike is, if that makes sense. So that's the concern with not having an actual registration if you plan to use it for attendance sake. Now, if you just tell the students, hey, if you don't give me a full name, I can't count you present, that can work too, but you know, I personally really like the registration if you're going to be pulling attendance from it.
You could always just have people put their say here in the chat or something in the first 5 minutes, like check in and then save your chat, or you should have it saved, to automatic save, and then you can review the chat after the session and go through and make sure that everyone was there.
Yep. And what a lot of folks like to do if they use the chat roll call is to do a 5 before to 5 after type time to say between 5 minutes before the session starts to 5 minutes after. That is your 10 minutes to say here. That way you as a faculty don't have to go through the entire chat looking for every time someone says here. Like she said, just give them a little bit of a window. Yeah, there's different ways to do it. It's really what you prefer. What other questions we got? We have about 15 minutes left that we can certainly answer any questions, concerns, help out with anything. I highly recommend the PDF that I sent, checking it out. Great tools built into Zoom for engagement. It's just super useful information. If you are having trouble going to sleep tonight, just pull that up, read through it, watch those videos, and it'll put you right to sleep. All right, I'm going to end my screen share. And my video, I will still be available in chat for at least a few more minutes. But you folks have a wonderful afternoon. If you need anything else, feel free to reach out. Again, Levi Sterling, Jennifer Jordan, we're here to help out as much as possible. You folks have a great day.